So today I'm going to give you a rapid sort of information presentation on controlled environment agriculture. Who's heard of controlled environment agriculture? Okay, good. So we have an informed audience here. So my job is just to give you a sort of high-level overview and a little bit on the state of the industry. And then we've got three incredible panelists who are experts in this and actually doing it on the ground to answer some of our questions and some of your questions. So first, who am I? I'm Henry Gordon Smith, CEO of Agritecture, a humble little consulting firm that I started about 10 years ago. And we really are on a mission to accelerate climate-smart agriculture, and we believe controlled environment agriculture is one of those applications, as it's potentially more adaptable to climate change and can allow us to grow food in certain places where we weren't able to, use less water, use less land. Well, you'll hear more about that. And we've worked around the world. So as a global citizen myself, it was very important to work globally, and we've had the pleasure of working, actually we crossed 250 clients in over 40 countries to date. So controlled environment agriculture, as the name implies, it's about control. You're trying to optimize production by controlling climate, controlling irrigation, controlling nutrients, controlling light as much as possible. But there's two main types of CEA. One of them is vertical farming, which is typically the stacked cultivation of crops in a hydroponic system, tends to have no natural light, so completely artificial. Or there's greenhouses that have some natural light, sometimes artificial light. And those are the two main different types of CEA that we see most often. And this is a very simple slide that sort of breaks down the advantages and disadvantages of each. If you have questions about this, you can of course ask our expert panel coming up. But essentially vertical farming, is even more control potentially, but at a cost, and has some limitations on the variety of crops you can grow in it. That's the sort of short, high level. But here's a quick snapshot for you to get an idea of what that looks like. But as we see around the world, we see there's actually many different kinds of controlled environment agriculture, including a wide range of crops. So we see projects like Gotham Greens that does some on-the-ground and rooftop greenhouses, which are kind of exciting. In-farm really, at the beginning, started with these retail units in-store to connect with the customer, and then these hubs that produce a larger quantity of volume. We also see projects like App Harvest that are focused on new markets, new regions, economic development. Smallhold is growing mushrooms in New York City and other cities. I was just in Almeria, Spain, where they're growing dragon fruit in a greenhouse, which I thought was quite interesting. And we also see some projects focusing on insects and cannabis and other crops. So there's really quite a wide range of business models and types. But what we do tend to see in vertical farming is more leafy green production, and greenhouses can be leafy greens into fruits and other types of vine crops as well. What's been really interesting is that this sector has raised a ton of money. So we estimate there's about $7 billion that have been raised, and there's even some companies that have sort of reached unicorn status, so to say. And those are listed here. But there's also a lot of smaller companies that have raised notable amounts of funding and are getting started. And just like many other aspects of ag tech, there's sort of these generations that have occurred. The first generation that's more pioneering, sort of testing the water. The next generation that benefits from that generation's knowledge and the talent. And there's even a generation 3 now in vertical farming that's coming. So those smaller companies potentially could really rise up quite quickly. And the reason I wanted to highlight funding is because the sector right now is going through a bit of trouble if you haven't been watching. There's been a lot of companies that have gone out of business, and a lot of this investment money has been lost. So one of our jobs today is to sort of answer those questions about what's happening in the CEA sector right now. So Agritecture has done a bit of analysis. I hope you can see this on the big screen. Yeah, I think you can. And so this is essentially what's been happening in just Q4 of 2022. Different announcements from companies that have been doing layoffs or shut down, and their reasons for doing that. And there's an article, if you want to follow up with me, that has these charts in it as well, or you'll get these as a follow-up to this event. So you can see there's hundreds of millions of dollars in many cases that have been funded to these companies, and most of the companies are citing aspects of supply chain issues to get the projects built, or in the cases of Europe especially, really high energy prices. Now again, vertical farming, you're replacing the sun, so that energy cost is going to be really significant to help operate those farms. So rising energy prices could kill your business. Even in greenhouses, you have a lot of energy, so that can be really a big effect on that. But this is not necessarily new. There's been actually a lot of problems as we've tracked the sector over the past 10 years in agritecture, and there have been other failures that have occurred in this sector. My biggest concern is that we're not learning from the past mistakes. What I see as a consultant is I see a lot of companies repeating the same mistakes over and over again, and so I'm looking forward to discussing that a little bit more with our panel. What are they doing differently? How are they learning from those mistakes? And what are those mistakes that we want to avoid in the future? I wrote a little bit about this in an AgFunder article in December of 2021, and I applied the Gartner hype cycle to the sector. So even though things look pretty bad from multiple companies shutting down, and we heard this week that Plenty and 80 Acres are both doing layoffs, we don't need to despair too much because this is part of the tech journey. And so I wrote about the trough of disillusionment being applied to CEA, in particular vertical farming. And I think that we're just going to go through this correction period. I predict that we're going to continue to go down into the trough of disillusionment through 2024, and then we're going to start to see some really exciting mergers and acquisitions this year, next year, and we're going to start to see some stabilization in the sector as it starts to find its place. I think one of the biggest reasons why this has happened is basically the vertical farming sector in particular has overpromised. They've said we're sustainable. In fact, the carbon footprint of many vertical farms can be 9 times higher than field-grown agriculture. They've said we're profitable. In fact, most vertical farms are not profitable yet at an operational level. They've said we're impacting food security, but in most cases, they're just growing leafy greens. So all of this has started to catch up with them. You can't overpromise in this sector, and there's also been a lot of Silicon Valley tactics applied to this sector, which I think all of you know doesn't work very well in ag tech that needs a longer journey to prove itself. So what I think is going to come next is I think emerging markets are going to have the biggest growth, Southeast Asia and the Middle East. We don't really see a slowdown there. There's huge headwinds around climate change and basically population growth, and many of those regions import a lot of their product, or in the case of Southeast Asia, they consume a lot more of the leafy greens that these farms grow. I think there's going to be new investments. It's going to be a bit of a confusing year. We're going to see some people get big investments and other companies completely fail. But food security as a focus, which has really benefited the sector of CEA, is going to continue to be a priority globally. So we're not going to see a slowdown in interest. But what I'm most excited about is there's going to be more hybridization. There's going to be more of a discussion of how we can use greenhouses and vertical farming to complement conventional agriculture. And we're going to see more companies actually own both greenhouses and vertical farms. And I think that's a better approach to the food system, is sort of seeing these as tools in the toolbox as opposed to panaceas. So I'm excited about that next chapter. That's it for my intro presentation. Hopefully it gave you a little bit of a hint there, and you can see where to find me by email or Instagram or LinkedIn. And next up, I'd like to invite my amazing panelists to the stage. Let's start with Dave Vosberg from Local Bounty. Round of applause, everyone. Yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah, there you go. He brought product. He brought product. Thank you, Dave. Okay, next up, let's go to another Dave, Dave Chen from Equilibrium Capital. Yes. Thank you, Dave. And we've got Paul Salou, founder and CEO of Little Leaf Farms, onto the stage. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. So we've got a nice chunk of time to talk all about controlled environment agriculture. I'm going to have some questions for you, and then we really do want to hear from the audience. Anything tough, we're willing to take it. So let's first start with some introductions. Dave, tell us about you. Tell us about Local Bounty. What do you do that's unique and special?
Sure. Thanks, Henry. Dave Vosberg. I've been in the industry 8 years. I've worked for a greenhouse company. I've worked for a vertical farming company. And now I'm with Local Bounty, which is a company that blends both vertical and horizontal growing, trying to drive efficiency. And we went public 2 Novembers ago on the New York Stock Exchange. So anything I say here is not a representation of Local Bounty and is not a forward-looking statement. But yeah, I think if I could touch on just maybe 3 or 4 points.
Yeah, give us your intro.
And these are things that I think, and you know, I'm looking forward to hearing what my colleagues have to say, but these are points that I think are really important for anyone looking at the space and wondering, how do I analyze this space? How do I understand the space? I think the first thing is, as Henry pointed out in his intro, all of these technologies are technologies. They're not panaceas. They're tools that can be used effectively in different geographies at different times for different crops to generate profit. And I think that's really important. There's no such thing as a winner technology. All these technologies will contribute to controlled environment ag. So that's the first point. The second is unit economics. This is the driver of everything that we do. And I think as folks in agriculture, everyone here knows this, but I would say it's really important that we bring it back there whenever we're thinking about indoor ag, because a lot of folks will pay it lip service, but they're not serious about it. They got into the space for other reasons, and really those that are obsessed with unit economics are the ones that are going to be left standing. So asking questions about companies about return on invested capital, ratios of CapEx to EBITDA, CapEx to revenue are going to be really important for us having a like-minded framework for understanding which companies are on the right trajectory and are not headed into the trough. The third point I'll make is indoor grown product for specialty crops has an opportunity to be different. It's cleaner, it has a longer shelf life, and has the potential to go into value-added products in a new way that can delight the customer. This is a high bar and a promise that a lot of CEA companies have made to retailers, but it's something that we have to deliver on now. But there is huge potential to go into value-added and other SKUs. And then finally, lots of folks got into this industry because they thought, oh, technology is so exciting, or I'm so passionate about sustainability. Those two things are not going to pay the bills. Technology needs to provide a return on capital, and sustainability is the outcome of the most efficient indoor farming practices. So I'll just say those two things, and I'll pass it on to my colleagues for more comments and context.
Thank you. Great points to kick us off, Dave. Really appreciate that. We'll talk about that at value a little bit more and what you got here. But let's go over to you, Dave. You bring the finance perspective, but you know a lot about this sector. You've been doing it for a while. So tell us who you are and what Equilibrium does.
Yeah, Dave Chen, Equilibrium. We were founded in 2008, and as an investment firm, and our work is all about taking advantage of sustainability-driven trends and investing in real assets and serving an institutional client base. And so at this point in time, we're managing probably about $2 billion of institutional capital, focused on two primary portfolio areas. That is sustainability as it changes the ag and food sector. And then we also have a large portfolio in waste to energy. So we're among the largest producers of biomethane in the U.S. We entered the controlled environment agriculture space in about 2015-16, literally driving around Holland and learning why the Europeans were eating from greenhouses, and the U.S. Had a relatively modest set of, significant but modest, given our population, greenhouse installation. And at the time in 2015-16, quite a bit of our food system that was greenhouse grown came from Mexico and Canada. And we asked the fundamental question, why? And why isn't the U.S. on a per capita basis equivalent to Holland? And we came to the conclusion that we were going to reach an inflection point pretty quickly for the growth of greenhouses, controlled environment, protected agriculture, and that as an institutional investor, this represented a great opportunity for us. And so we entered in 2016. And since then, we've pulled together a fairly significant exposure in the various elements of controlled environment agriculture.
Thank you. I'm just curious how you saw that. So you went to the Netherlands and then you just sort of, it clicked for you. Because the difference between the Netherlands and the US is dramatic. I think it's like 45,000 acres of greenhouse in the Netherlands, and I think in the US it's maybe 6,000.
No, not even close.
Not even close.
Called the European economy, sort of roughly the equivalent, a little bit larger than the U.S. in populations. And you're right, it's about 45,000. in North America, and you had to call it that because in Leamington, Ontario, you
Yeah, there's
probably
a
had
lot
about,
there. Oh.
you know, between Leamington, Ontario, you had about 1,000 acres. In the U.S., all told, maybe you had 1,000 acres, and then Mexico had about 3,500.
Yeah, unbelievable.
And this is 2015, 2016 timeframe. And you know, I'll tell you the story that we did all our research. Literally, I mean, you know how big Holland is. We literally drove 2,000 kilometers over a series of months visiting with folks and really understanding it. And I'll tell you the magic moment for us was we had been working on the research and development of whether controlled environment agriculture would flip in the U.S. or not. And at the time, we were working with Walmart. And everybody in this room, because you're an ag, knows what Walmart is in terms of it serves middle income and below. The average Walmart customer is an American population that is in the fat part of the bell curve and below. All right? And roughly about 2016, we wandered into Walmart, and they had a very important project in Walmart, which was called Project Resilience. And that is that they were increasingly concerned about the resilience of their fresh produce supply chain because of the volatility that they were starting to see. And in many ways, the single point of failure called California. All right? And they were hell-bent. And remember, Walmart as a grocer in the United States is now 50% grocery versus the other goods like basketballs and T-shirts. And so produce is a huge component of their revenue. And they're now, you know, at the time in 2015, 2016, they were about 22% market share in the country. And so resilience was a huge issue. Stockouts are not acceptable. And the fact that it floods in Florida or it has a drought in California, they have to work their way through that for resilience and reliability and predictability of their supply chain. And the moment that it turned for us that we decided to go hard into this category was when the head of produce said, look, you need to understand, my consumer is average income or below, and none of you guys have ever shopped like her, okay? She is a fixed budget shopper. So when she puts something in the basket, something came out, and you guys have never done that, and you need to understand that. And so when they're shopping and putting greenhouse tomatoes or these grape tomatoes in their basket, they took something out. Mm. And that is an incredible signal to us about the inflection of the consumer, all right? And so that's when we walked out of there and said, let's go.
Let's go for it.
Let's go.
Yeah.
It's time, okay? Because it's not ours to understand why the behavior is changing. It's only ours to understand that it has changed.
A super interesting anecdote to share that story, because I think we've all sort of had our own moments where there's been a signal where you said, okay, like CEA is going to happen. I think it's probably interesting to many of you that, you know, don't necessarily engage in CEA. But let's go over to you, Paul, and tell us about Little Leaf Farms and what you do, and a little about your history, because you also have been in this sector quite a long time, even before Little Leaf.
Great, yeah, I'm founder and CEO of Little Leaf Farms. So we're North America's largest hydroponic producer of baby leaf greens. The only third-party objective measurement of the size of the market is Nielsen data, which, you know, is what is scanned at retail for all of us who shop at groceries. So we represent about 42% of the entire CEA category for packaged lettuce in North America. And unlike others who come into this space, I'm a lifelong farm boy. My family operates the largest greenhouse nursery business in New England. My brother Mark runs at Pride's Corner Farms. So I come from the greenhouse industry, obviously pursued food as compared to ornamental. And one of the things we've seen is that we think the food system is in the midst of a transformation right now. The idea of microclimates, I was talking about this at lunch with somebody. Yes, there are microclimates, but they're not as stable as they were in the past in the era of climate change. So if you look at, you know, sort of the tailwinds for CEA, right now packaged lettuce and lettuce in general, it's grown in Salinas and then in wintertime, Yuma, Arizona. So those are obviously two microclimates, but just look at Salinas last year. Temperatures were in the high 90s. That's not a microclimate for lettuce. Then they ended up having a severe virus, the INSV virus, which wiped out many of their fields. Now they're having biblical rain events, which are going to delay springtime planting. So what this sends a signal to the retailers are exhausted. So even though CEA is very small, we're a little bit over 3% of packaged salad, the retailers are exhausted by the inconsistency and lack of reliable supply from the West Coast producers. So all of our retailers, and we sell from Whole Foods to Walmart and everybody in between, they are leaning in hard. We think it's very much of a growth area. And with that 3% number, we look at that saying that capacity has to be built out. And you're going to follow the same laws of business: highest quality, lowest cost of production. Me being a lifelong farm boy, that was drilled into me. So I don't view this as a tech play. This is about producing food, and supplying it to a very competitive retail grocery customer that is very focused on what they're buying for. So we're able to compete. We have been profitable since our second year in business, and we financed Little Leaf the old-fashioned way. I signed on the banknote and put up equity capital. So no interest in Dave, being a public company. Good luck. And the other greenhouse companies and other vertical farms that have gone public, I say the same thing to them. I would not want to be a startup company and be a public company. So we made a bunch of mistakes. We've learned, we've iterated. Very proud to have Dave Chen as one of my early investors. And we've learned, and we think there's a long growth path ahead for CEA here in North America.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Paul. And the numbers that you shared from that Nielsen data and just the domination that Little Leaf is having right now is very impressive. So congratulations to you and your team. And I've always enjoyed visiting your facility and seeing the tech in action, plus the commitment to quality and the brand and everything. You're hitting so many of those pieces, which is really awesome. So Dave, let's talk about, since you're a bit more familiar with vertical farming versus greenhouse, can you help us understand that? Right after all this conversation about the customer, about solving resilience challenges, why are people even doing vertical farming?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. When we think about the advantages of vertical farming, it has less relationship to what's happening outside, to weather, to sunlight, to rain, and it has less relationship to other factors. It can be more automated and require less labor. However, likely it's going to be more expensive. I would say undoubtedly it's going to be more expensive on a per pound basis unless you're located in a low energy, low labor environment, someplace like the Middle East or some, kind of very niche area of the United States that has, 1 or 2 cent per kilowatt hour source of electricity. But even then, I think one of the key metrics that we focus on in our technology is what is the cost of CapEx per pound of product produced. Mm-hmm. And I think only in certain circumstances does vertical farming make sense, because it really will cost you upwards around $30 to $40 per pound of lettuce produced per year of CapEx. And it's tough to pay that back in a reasonable time frame that creates a return for your investors. But still, when we think about what else is indoor farming good at, vertical farming, propagation comes to mind. I know Dave Chen has mentioned that he sees as well the opportunity for vertical propagation have meaningful contribution. Paul and I were talking in the back about how he propagates on 2 levels indoors, so some vertical element of propagation. But when the plants are really small, they're so close together, your CapEx and OpEx contribution per plant site is really low. And you get a more uniform product in that early life stage. I think there's the potential even to think about, how does that propagation capability get applied in other areas of agriculture? So I think that's an open-ended question that that deserves a lot more exploration before we'll know how meaningful a contribution vertical farming can make to propagation at large. But I think those are some of the differences. I know throughout the world there are different climates, different cost structures. So
Yeah, I think that's a great example on the propagation piece, and I think also very interesting this audience. We've seen vertical farms now that are growing seed potatoes and then applied to field-grown agriculture. We've seen vertical farming now being applied to forestry for some young plant production, applied to pharma, and those are places where, yeah, that CapEx or that additional control may make more sense in the face of some of the challenges that outdoor farmers are facing. So one way for you to think about how it might fit into your business. Now, Dave, you're an investor, a pretty prolific one. Why are people funding all these vertical farms? Especially, we'll talk about what's going on now, but like, how do you explain so many investors, even big-time investors, funding these vertical farms?
Okay, so we're not a venture capitalist, and so our perspective, I think, is a little bit different. I'll answer your question, but I'd like to talk about the other part of the market that, in fact, wasn't on your slides, all right? So look, ag is, in spite of the fact that John Deere tractors are probably one of the most sophisticated software systems and integrated farm management systems anywhere, and despite the fact that it has more automation and unseen automation, agriculture really hasn't been hit and disrupted by technology of all the major sectors, whether it's e-com, healthcare, industrial automation. And so I think the allure of agriculture, and it happens every 10 years in venture, is it's going to happen here.
This is the time.
And so the words disruption, disaggregation, disintermediation, and it's very seductive, all right? But you forget that agriculture is not one big thing. It's sort of four markets, right? It's food, fiber, fuel, and so it's radically different to look at the field cropping, row cropping versus permanent cropping versus produce, all right? So, but Silicon Valley thinks that technology is going to solve everything because technology is the fundamental of it, all right? And they don't really take the time to understand the basic economic components of getting a product to market. So I got a whooping in 2004 when the first bioethanol and all this and biodiesel was coming about. And this is a great example. I went to our friends at Cargill VC and I said, oh my God, this whole biofuels and biodiesel is going to be so cool. And there's these companies that are going to cut the production of biodiesel by half. And they asked me a very simple question. How much of biodiesel's total cost of goods sold is actually the production of it? And I said, oh God, that's a great question. Well, it's about 15%. All right. So the feedstock is actually the vast majority of it. And the Cargill said, look, how about this? You're 100% more productive making biodiesel than I am. So you took 15% and made it 7.5. I can order a 50-mile long train of my balance sheet allows me to order a 50-mile long train of corn. I beat you. You go ahead and have your 7% because I'll basically factor your 7% out by the train of feed, all right? So that was a very early lesson to understand the component costs of where technology can actually compress it, all right? So that's why I think we're seeing this mania because vertical farms are disruptive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
All right. I won't go into any detail, but I think the category, and for you as an audience, if you're not familiar with CEA, I think it's important to know that most of what Henry so articulately laid out were startups. And what's really important in the greenhouse sector in North America is that it is populated with a whole flurry of $100 million revenue companies all the way through to the $2.5 billion, 800-pound gorilla in greenhouse produce. So you've got a ton of $400, $500, $600 million sized companies making revenues of that size for the last decade in greenhouse peppers, cucumbers, tomatoes, and now you've got them emerging in the whole leafy greens area, and over the course of the next few years, you're going to see them disrupting the berry business. So not only do you have in this industry a whole series of startups, you've also got these massive incumbents, and many of the transactions, the most interesting transactions that have taken place in the last 24 months, actually in a hidden way happened with these companies, and the kinds of financings and failures that you noted, which are appropriate, happened in a lot of the startups.
Yeah, it's a great point on where the action's actually happening. Thank you for that as well. So Paul, let's go back to leafy greens, and a lot of our audience grows staple crops or different products that are much bigger markets, so to say. But why leafy greens? Why is it interesting, and why is that market interesting to you?
Yeah, I mean, as Dave mentioned, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, now berries, are widespread in using CEA, mostly greenhouse technology. So I have an experience having built a 42-acre tomato greenhouse in Maine. So, I've done other crops outside of lettuce. But when I looked at lettuce, and I started Little Leaf about a little over 7 years ago, this was a crop that had not yet been really impacted by CEA. So even today, we're 3%, right? So you could say CEA is still very small in the overall. And I saw what happened in tomatoes over a 30-year period, where tomatoes migrated from field grown to greenhouse grown at the retail grocery. So when greenhouses were first starting here in the United States for tomatoes, it was single digits, similar to where lettuce is right now. Now it's over 60%. I'm talking about greenhouse tomatoes in retail grocery. So I saw that as a model that leafy greens had not yet gone through that process. And if you look at a tomato greenhouse anywhere in the world, it's a stable, consistent, replicable technology. It'll be a greenhouse, it'll be a hanging gutter, it'll be whether you go to China, Russia, Western Europe, or North America. If you go to a leafy green facility right now, you'll see a variety of different vertical farms. You'll see a variety of different greenhouses. You'll see a variety of different growing systems, which I think is a sign of an early stage opportunity. And what will happen, markets are really, really good at figuring this out. So it's going to go back to business fundamentals. Highest quality, low cost of production and servicing your customer. It's business fundamentals. This will go through the same thing. We're in the early days right now. We've seen a bunch of shakeouts in 22. When money is no longer free, prior to 22, you could say money was free, right? Now we're in a rising interest rate, inflationary environment. So the money-losing business models that are out there that are not willing to have investors continue to support, you're already seeing bankruptcies and you're seeing layoffs, and I think we're in early stage right now of seeing that as well. But having said that, winning business models will emerge as well.
Yeah, very exciting next chapter there, and I appreciate all the honesty from this panel. It's not something you get that often from CEA panelists, so we're grateful for that. Dave, I want to talk to you about this added value product. You mentioned that, so let's get into that. Why can CEA, or like Local Bounty, how can you create added value products that are different from outdoor grown? And as a follow-up, what's your take on this strawberries are next thing that Dave mentioned?
Yeah, sure. I think maybe just a brief history lesson on leafies and consumer behavior. A long time ago, the wet wall dominated grocery stores. You walk in and it's an entire row of naked produce on the wall, with twisty ties. And then the innovation of bag salad came up. And after that, salad and clamshells, so that, the product would never get smushed. And recently, salad kits has come on in the past few years as the leading category, highest growth category. It's $8 billion and growing at a higher CAGR than all the other kind of sections of produce. And so when you have customer obsession, you do what the customer wants you to do, which is create more value-added products with closer to a meal-ready solution. And so we've been pursuing that because we feel called to do so by our customers. And so this is just an example, but it's essentially a butter head and a package of a pre-mixed Asian chicken salad. You heat that up, you throw it on your butter lettuce leaves, and you have Asian chicken salad wrap, just like a P.F. Chang's. So I think there's those opportunities,
No problem.
to really engage with the customer and create more delight. And I think other CEA firms, we're not alone in doing this, lots of other CEA firms are doing that. But what makes CEA unique is our sell-by date can be longer than outdoor because we don't have the same challenges of, birds flying overhead, dirt, other things happening, stuff happens in ag, right? And so our product lasts longer, it's a bit cleaner. We can create something that will taste better, will last longer in the fridge, and hopefully delight the customer better. Americans are very funny. They love their shelf-stable products, but they want the freshness too. And those things are in opposition, but CEA enables a path to have both. Regarding strawberries, I think the jury is still out on what format in which strawberries could go indoors. There's some approaches to do very low CapEx protected agriculture that I think are having success in mild climates like California. There's some greenhouse grown strawberries in Canada for a fanatical local clientele who really want that local produce product and are willing to pay more. Those are two kinds of strawberry production that's working, I think. But the question is, does greenhouse production translate to the rest of North America? That's a question mark. Is there willingness to pay? I think we're going to see some innovations here. There's a pineberry, which is a white strawberry that's out from Florida that tastes exceptional. So I think there's some product differentiation coming that could be interesting, and it's a more delicate product with a willingness to pay. Could make sense undercover. But I think we're still exploring strawberries, what's going to work, what's not. I think and then there's very expensive strawberries. Bowery and Oishi both have delicious strawberries, very limited volumes in the New York metro area. So it's an exciting space to watch. But I don't think anyone has, found the formula yet for how that's going to sort itself out.
Thank you for that. So I've got two more questions for these panelists, and then I want to hear from all of you. So if you have questions ready, get them ready, because we're going to dive in. Dave, in my presentation, and, we talked about what the articles are sort of citing. Rising energy costs was the major one for a lot of these companies, saying why they're failing. Now, that could be an excuse, et cetera, but I'm just curious, you work with so many CA operators globally. They're facing their own challenges, or they're not immune to the challenges of supply chain issues, labor issues, or energy issues. Is that a real reason why they're struggling, and how are your companies facing those challenges?
Look, let's be real. In the United States, our energy challenges have been minimal compared to Europeans, where they did legitimately go 4x to 10x.
Yeah, when they say they have energy issues in the U.S., that's a joke.
And so I don't see that.
Yeah.
I mean, look, this just comes down to economics. If you just do the quick math, if a company has 500 people and they're shutting down in a farm production, I just got to ask, given the size of their farm, there can't be more than 100 of the 500 that were involved in farming. So what are the 400 people doing? They're doing technology development.
R&D.
And an average salary of $150,000, okay? I mean, you're looking at $60 million.
Yeah.
Now, that's a lot of lettuce, all right, to compensate for that.
But
right?
the strawberries.
Oh, geez, and so this is a simple matter of math. I mean, you're flogging a lot of lettuce to compensate for $60 million of engineering.
But the wheat, remember the wheat?
Right. So I think that's really the issue, and so our operators tend to be like, we have the huge. Sitting next to me is the top leafy greens operator in the United States, probably the world. All right, in terms of productivity per square meter, profitability per square meter, and that's just discipline, managing the overhead, and it's a farm operation, and so the main thing that leads to a lot of the failures that you've quoted is, are you a tech company? In other words, do you wear a hoodie, okay? Or are you a farm operator that operates very differently than a field farmer, but nonetheless you're a farmer, all right? And if your answer is I wear a hoodie, okay, you probably have a very different cost structure than Paul. And if your answer is I'm an operator with a sourcing network, with great relationships, I don't try to get fancy, all those things, but I'm producing great food.
Yeah.
All right? And the other thing is, it's always very frustrating to be quoted that there are 8 billion hungry people in the world, okay? And that we are needing food and it's food for the masses. And then page 2 is value add elite food, okay? Sold at a premium. Help me with I need to feed the masses.
Right.
Okay? And I've got elite food.
Yeah, vitamin water.
Right?
For them, yeah.
And so that lesson we were taught by the Walmart executive has lasted and guided us throughout. So we're always looking for the operators that understand what the job is, where they apply technology to make a competitive difference in either value, productivity, taste, the use of genetics. And so we tend to be more in the growth equity, the guys that are doing $200 million a year or more, and we're providing them expansion capital.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so different, right? There's like this hubris of reinventing agriculture that a lot of these companies exhibit and they get obsessed with, that I think goes back to like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Like, we're gonna save the world with this like engineered tower versus the practicality of growing food for people.
At the end of the day, no matter how much technology you put inside and no matter how much you quote Intel inside, it's still a head of lettuce.
Yeah.
It's still a blueberry.
Okay, Paul, let's go over to you. So, you're an actual farmer, right, that's now working with CEA. What tech are you excited about? Because tech is a part of this, right? We talked about the obsession with tech. We talked about being a tech versus an operator. You're clearly an operator. But you've got automated systems that I've seen, very minimal labor in the actual farm operation itself. You've got multi-layer production, which was certainly a CapEx decision and a tech decision. What tech are you excited about, and how do you think about tech for your operations?
Great question, and Dave Chen touched on this. You have to define your business. We are a grower, packer, marketer of branded product. Now, that's how I define my business. We don't define our business as a technology company. Are we technology literate? Are we, you could say, technology experts around CEA? I think the answer would be yes, right? So, but what we do, we don't spend capital to develop technology. We spend our capital, and we've acted as our own EPC general contractor in building all of our facilities. We go to the best technology providers in the world: water technical, lighting, greenhouse controls, growing systems, greenhouse, climate. We select them, and then we integrate the technology together. So I view our systems are probably the most technologically advanced in the world. I am not a technology company. Yeah. I'm a grower, packer, marketer of branded food. And I love Dave Chen's comment about, what business are you in? We've had growers that have interviewed with us and interviewed at other CEA companies. And my first question to them, if you want to sell high-cost lettuce to rich people, don't come to work at Little Leaf Farms.
Right.
So our customer, we're competing against the West Coast. They dominate the market. We are after the Main Street market. And again, it's back to the business fundamentals: cost of production, highest quality.
Yeah, super helpful insights from all of you. Really, really appreciate it. Let's see if our audience has any questions. We've got a microphone gentleman over here. Who wants to go first? It's difficult to see with all the lights.
Dave? Yeah. Dave, thank you for answering my bombardment of questions at lunch today. I have one more for the group. How will strategic interest in controlled environment evolve, particularly with traditional produce players such as Dole and Taylor Farms?
Well, one of the things that Paul and I have discussed is the fact that retailers have toggled over and are making choices about resilience and availability of product. And to paraphrase you, the phase where the retailers were going through piloting of greenhouse-grown vegetables is over, and they're now in deployment. The problem with that is this is still a physical plant facility. We're not eating digital food, all right? So you got to have the farm in order to be able to do that. And the problem that you have with players like Taylor Farms is, at 2.5 billion pounds per year of consumption, of sourcing of, the entire greens area and vegetable area, but dominated by leafies, in order to actually get to 100, 200 million pounds is a lot of construction. I mean, literally, I would say that to get to 200 million pounds, you're looking at probably somewhere around about $4 billion of CapEx and probably about 6, 7, 8 years of disciplined, methodical building and construction. That's a huge lift. And so, given the size of Dole, given the size of Taylor Farms, their real strategic challenge is, I see the train coming, I know it's inevitable, the question is, how do I get there? All right? And that is perhaps one of the great strategic questions. Frankly, it's not dissimilar to Kodak staring at a digital camera in 1986. I see the train coming. I know it's inevitable. What the hell do I do with my billions of dollars of silver halide, chemistry-driven, film-driven investments, legacy, pride, history, revenue? That's the problem.
How much do you think it's going to be accelerated by the recent issues in California?
Oh, it's just going to get worse.
Because you're talking about billions of dollars.
I mean, look,
right,
every time CNN does one of these reports where, Hurricane XYZ is going to whip Miami, okay?
Yeah.
It's great for us, we watch it and we go, oh, yeah, there's a
Go
hurricane,
indoors.
right? But Walmart goes nuts because what it means is that the hurricane's going to hit Miami and then it's going to go inland and become a tropical storm and dump 24 inches of water onto the tomato fields and all the crop fields, okay? 24 inches of water or 12 inches of water it's not compatible with roots.
Yeah, and I think Georgia had $4 billion of losses from one of those hurricanes. So it's like that's the kind of numbers you're talking about.
This is our reality, and then the dirty little secret that people need to really, whatever, it's such a political issue, but climate volatility, it's not just climate change, it's climate volatility.
The lack of predictability.
Inter-day volatility, okay,
Yeah, the
is here.
microclimates,
And the statistics will bear out volatility. You get 3 farmers together in any kind of a breakfast situation in the middle of nowhere. What's the first thing they talk about inside of the first cup of coffee? How's the weather?
Paul, you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, the West Coast guys have some really important decisions to make. They're really smart. I mean, they run really sophisticated businesses. They really know what they're doing. I believe there's a gentleman here from JV. Don't know of that company, but if they're growing out in the West, I mean, these guys are really good. They are going to have to make a very tough decision. And it's complicated. As I mentioned before, you can go to 25 different facilities that grow leafy greens differently. Again, totally different than tomatoes and other crops. So they are going to have to make sophisticated technology questions. The management of these facilities are so fundamentally different than a field operation that other than they both produce lettuce, that's the only thing they have in common. So it's a completely different management approach. We have at one of my facilities about 15 million live plants at any one time. We feel worst case scenario, we've got 5 hours. So something happens in the wintertime, something happens in the heat of the summertime, you have real biological risk way in excess of what you have to manage in field. Having said all that, they are super smart and sophisticated. They've already made some initial investments, so they will be coming.
Yeah.
I just think it's a matter of time. And so from my business standpoint, from Dave Vosberg's, we have to stay ahead. And that's what's great about operating in a free market. We got to stay on our toes.
Let's get some more questions here.
If I could add to just what Paul just said about how different the field is from indoor growing, it may sound like it's just you put a roof over a field, all right? But realize you're making 300 planting decisions a year. You're making 300 harvest decisions a year.
365.
I know. Maybe you take a few days off, But and the way that you think about your asset, think about how most farmers think about their wealth. It's in their land. Well, even if an acre is $25,000 an acre, you're going to plop $3 million per acre of steel, glass, and equipment on top of that. It's a fundamentally different model. Land is an appreciating asset versus your building is a depreciating asset. It's $3 million versus $25,000.
The economics are different too. You're delivering to a customer, usually at a fixed price. You're not playing commodity game.
Exactly.
Yep.
Whereas folks in Salinas are coordinating through Western growers, you know, to basically mow over their crop if they're not going to make money, and we would never do that, right? We're going to make money every time.
You
we
want the
harvest.
contract, the consistency, that's your value proposition, that's what you can
And the
provide.
number
It changes the relationship with the retailer as well.
Completely.
Retailers are not usually willing to give longer than 1 or 2 year contracts. We were able to get a 5-year offtake with Sam's Club because that relationship with the retailer is changing. The retailers are seeing it more. I mean, we're not a factory, it's still biology, it's still ag, but it's getting closer where we're able to somewhat, you know, provide consistent, you know, almost without a doubt, consistent supply of product to the retailers. It's a different relationship.
Okay, let's go, young man.
Thank you for that young man thing. I'll give you a couple of facts, and then I'll bounce it back to you to react and see whether you change or not change.
Sounds fun, let's go.
China has 5 million acres of greenhouses. Fact. The biggest vertical farm company in the world is Panasonic. They have dozens of operating in Japan. They don't make big money of it. There are greenhouses in Calgary, Alberta, that can stand the winter without energy input, passive solar. And if you wonder whether the problem of strawberries can be resolved, since June 22, 2022, a robot company that has strawberry harvesting robots, as robots that does treatments with ultraviolet, etc., merged with a company that builds greenhouses and tabletops for strawberries. So it looks as if things are moving faster than you describe.
Yes.
The train is coming.
The only fact I would quibble with you on is very minor. The 5 million acres that you quote in China, 99% of that is actually high tunnels.
Yeah, protected. Small.
Okay, but it is protected shelter. And your main comment is that given volatility, given all the constraints, we are moving to protected agriculture.
Yeah, which we agree with.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also fragmented, right? Your comment is this is different in different places, which is also what we've been saying, right? Like you could go to multiple operations, it's not consistent. It's not a proven singular way of doing this yet, which is a great opportunity for us to figure out or for the market to correct, as Paul mentioned. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. One last question, maybe? Or definitely? Over there?
I got it. Hello? Hi, I have a question regarding the word sustainability, sustainable real assets. So I actually looked it up. It means the ability to be maintained at a certain rate or level. Whereas before I thought it was replenishment of input sources. But my question is regarding fertilizer. I did my homework on how fertilizer is made, how carbon intensive it is. So I guess, my question is like, how do you assess the future of fertilizer production as well as potentially the future of regenerative agriculture? Is that a utopian idea or is there a real market opportunity there? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take a crack. So I love the idea of regenerative agriculture. You know, before I got into greenhouses, I was in the composting business. So I just think, how can you say anything other than that's great for everything around regenerative agriculture? Around the larger issue of sustainability and CEA, that's a really important one. That's why, from just a pure pragmatic standpoint, our technology decisions are greenhouses. Why? The sun is free, the water that falls out of the sky, free. We capture that, use that as our primary source of irrigation. Fertilizer, we're not certified organic, except for the fertilizers we use. We use urea and other kind of non-OMRI certified fertilizers. We use those because we get the highest yield, as compared to organic fertilizers. And so from that standpoint, that ties to the sustainability around carbon footprint. That means per pound of our product, we use less energy. And the other key thing with greenhouses, we operate 365, so I'm in northern climates, so I use supplemental grow lights, but the key aspect of that is that they are supplemental to the sun. And that allows me to have stable production throughout the year. But energy cost as a percentage of my sales is sort of mid-single digits. So, and having said that, we're looking at decarbonization and on-site renewables to further drive that down. So sustainability and CEA, depending on what type of production asset you're looking at, can wildly vary. But sustainability is really something we think about carefully and really try to embrace at Little Leaf Farms.
Thank you for that. We have a few minutes left, but we're basically done, and you all did awesome. But I just would like to invite you to give some final thoughts to this, let's call it a more conventional agriculture audience. How should they think about what's coming next in CEA? How should they think about CEA as it relates to their businesses? We've got people from inputs businesses, we've got farmers, we've got farm managers, we've got all kinds of technologies for outdoor agriculture. One by one, what do you think you want to leave them as a message related to CEA and their future?
I think what Dave Chen said is right. If you do the math, it's going to require billions of dollars to shift production indoors. But if the customer prefers it, the retailer prefers it, it's more efficient, and it tastes better, it's going to happen. So I think that wave is coming, and to Paul's point, it happened with tomatoes, it's going to happen with leafies. Think about how, whatever you do in your business, how you might fit into that. Once we get through this trough of disillusionment, we have the successful companies coming out of it. Think about how you can participate in contributing and making money from that transition.
Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the number one thing to keep in mind is, agriculture is dependent on climate and weather. And we've had the benefit of thousands of years of stable climate. That's what's allowed us to be what we are. If in fact we're getting more volatile, it's hard to move a hunk of land. Right? It's easy to move your factory, not easy to move a hunk of land. So we're going to have to go into adaptation, and I think that CEA is just another form of adaptation.
Yeah. Thank you.
Excuse me.
I share the bullishness of the gentleman who referenced Panasonic and the other. CEA is coming. CEA is here, it's coming, it's growing. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts. To me, our strategy is peri-urban, the perimeter of urban markets, and that's the way it was. Farms prior to World War II, the suburbs used to feed the cities, right? Now they're suburbs. So you're not going to go back and do soil farming on this land because it's already built up. CEA fits there. So this food system transformation, call it back to the future, right? That's what's happening, but in a very different, with certainly a lot of technology and very different looking farms than were there for, say, our grandfathers and great-grandfathers.
One note, because most of you are, I came to understand, are technology suppliers. Of the $3 million an acre, 50% of that is technology. Everyone looks at a greenhouse and sees glass and steel construction. Mm-hmm. That's de minimis. That's actually incredibly efficient and not very expensive. It's all the stuff that goes into it, which is all tech. So well over 50% of your greenhouse budget is technology.
Well, thank you so much to our panelists and our audience for engaging in this controlled environment agriculture topic. Of course, you could ask us, including me, any questions about greenhouses or vertical farms. We'd love to hear from you. And we are out of time. Let's have a round of applause for them, please.
The Global Ag Tech Initiative reports cutting-edge technologies and analyzes trends that help drive your business forward. Subscribe to The Signal today to get the latest information straight to your inbox. The Global Ag Tech Alliance, led by Meister Media Worldwide's Global Ag Tech Initiative, brings together a highly fractured and competitive industry to discover what we have in common and what we can all do to improve the speed and depth of technology adoption in agriculture. The Alliance, through the work of the consortium of industry-leading organizations, is a principal source of research, advocacy, and education in the areas of precision agriculture and digital farming. If you're a thought leader in the industry, please join us today.